Good evening. Welcome back. It's time for a pastor's Bible study. Welcome to St. Matthew African Methodist Episcopal Church of Orange, New Jersey. Here we will journey through the sacred text together. Grab your Bible. Everyone is invited. No matter where you are in knowledge, you are welcome here. Come grow in faith with our pastor, the Reverend Melvin E. Wilson, our pastor teacher. Our pastor is excited. Pastor is ready to increase your knowledge and faith as we discover that the Bible is Black history. Ready, set, let's go.
We add a little something to it, just to encourage you. We're gonna take you to church later. Let's go. To all my brothers out there. To all my sisters in the struggle. Till that day. Hey. Let us march on to victory.
Good evening, everybody. God bless you, and thank you so much for joining our Bible study tonight. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you. We praise you for this day, the privilege you give us to gather for this Bible study tonight. I ask that you would take this information and help us to receive it. Open our hearts and our minds so that we might be blessed by the conversation and the learning. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Sister Paulette, you have questions? Unmute yourself if you do.
It said the host wasn't allowing it. Good evening, Pastor. I have a question, and I think it's pertaining to our history. My question is, with the war going on in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, we have talked about the prophets and their prophecies. Do prophecies expire? And the reason I'm asking this question is because Israel has been in war with others from ever. So do the prophets and their prophecies, is there a time limit? 30 years? Here we are in 2023. And that's the question.
All right. So did you look at the outline tonight yet?
No, I just got it.
Okay. So let me go through the outline, and I may be able to answer your question as we go.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to put the outline in the chat one more time in case you didn't get access to it. Tonight we are continuing our study, the general study on the Bible is Black history. But what I want to do tonight in deference to what's going on in the world, is talk about the conflict between Israel and Palestine. All right. I want to spend some time tonight talking about the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And as I said in the beginning of this study, you recall I said that there will be times when we go on tangents. All right. They are related tangents, but they are tangents nonetheless. So in light of what's going on right now between Israel and Palestine, I thought it was important that we take a few minutes and try to get some clarity on what this conflict is about. I am relatively sure that most of us are not completely clear on what this fighting is all about. All right. But if you really look at it, and you'll see this momentarily, we are dealing with the region of the world that is connected with and involves the continent of Africa. All right. Now you ain't never gonna hear none of that on the news, right? You're never gonna hear nobody talking about that this region of the world is closely connected to Africa, and as we've already learned, was a part of what was called Northeast Africa. All right. Never going to hear that discussion. All right. But I think it is important for us to spend a little time tonight talking about the nature of this conflict. All right. So the focus tonight, if you have the outline, the focus tonight is what is the history and what is the nature of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. All right. Why are they fighting? Right. And for me, a personal question has been, why does the United States government seem to unequivocally support Israel? Right now, let me say this, because I know this is going out on Facebook Live and Zoom and everywhere. Normally, and YouTube and everywhere, normally when you have any conversation about Israel, you are immediately labeled as being anti-Semitic. All right. There is not one anti-Semitic bone in my body. Right. But I believe that we should be able to discuss both the religious aspect and the political aspects of what's going on. All right. The religious aspects and the political aspects. And ladies and gentlemen, it is very important that as we do these studies on this subject matter, that these are not one-offs, right? Every week, every lesson is connected to the lesson before, and you have to somehow try to maintain the understanding that we get in these teachings. All right. Keep reviewing the information, because the hour that we spend together really does not give us the time to keep kind of going back and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. And for many of us, since this is very new information, it will take some time for us to ingest it and receive it and learn it. All right. So what we want to deal with tonight is what is the history and nature of the conflict between Israel and Palestine? Why are they fighting? Why does the United States government seem to unequivocally support Israel? And is there, since this is Bible study, is there any biblical connection to this? Right? Is there any biblical connection to any of this? And again, the reason we are doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is because we must have what I call situational awareness. In other words, we cannot live in this world and not know and pay attention to what's going on. Now, you may not be interested in it. A lot of folks say, I don't watch the news because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know what's going on. But believe me when I tell you that everything that happens on the global stage, whether you want to know it or not, affects you. It affects me. It affects what you pay for gas. It affects what we pay for food. It affects airline ticket prices. It affects tuition. So everything that's happening on the global stage, for those of you who are invested in the market, it affects your stock price, right? Everything is connected. So as I tried to say Sunday, I don't know how successful I was, quote unquote, but I tried to say in the sermon Sunday, I asked the question, have you heard, right? How can we not know? There are things that are happening in our lives. We may not want to pay attention to it. We may not want to have anything to do with it. But these things affect and impact our day-to-day lives. And this attack that occurred the other day didn't just come out of the sky. It didn't just happen because they didn't have nothing else to do. There are reasons for it, right? What happened in 9/11, 2001, as wrong as it may have been, there's reason for it. Now, you don't have to know. We've dropped the notes in the chat several times. We'll do it again. You don't have to know every single thing about it, right? But you do need to know that all of these things are absolutely connected. So, ladies and gentlemen, just like is the case with this Bible study and everything else, we have to have situational awareness, right? We have to be aware of what is going on, whether we like it, whether we believe it, whether we see it or not. We've got to be aware of what is happening. That's called situational awareness. Okay, so the reason we're kind of taking a little left, if you just joined us, taking a little tangent tonight, going a little left on our The Bible is Black History study, is because this thing just happened, and this is happening in the region that we are discussing. Okay, so if you have your outline, I want to also finally say, as a qualifier, I am no expert on any of this. Okay, I am not an expert on geopolitical politics. I am not an expert on what's happening in that region. I'm not an expert on it, right? So please, some of you may know more about this than I do, and feel free to share factual information that you know and that you have, so that all of us can be edified. All right, so that all of us can be edified. Now, since this is Bible study, we need to begin with what is the biblical beginning of this conflict, right? We basically have two entities. I can make an argument that it's really one entity, right? When we talk about the nation of Israel, it's like we started out with this study that all humanity is related, right? So everybody is related. This really is a intra family conflict, if you will. But as nations are developed, as peoples are developed over time, if we believe the biblical story and follow the biblical process, We have what became known as Israel, and we had what became known as really the Philistines, right? And the translation of the word Philistine in the Greek is Palestine. All right. So we have Israel and Palestine. And some of the difficulty with doing a study like this is that we are looking at it in a modern day media filtered way, very politically, not biblically. But if we take the biblical approach to it, there are really, in my estimation and in my opinion only, there are really only two reasons for this conflict. All right. So you're going to need to have the outline in front of you to see what I'm talking about. All right. So the biblical beginnings of this whole thing, you have to start with the whole notion of land, L-A-N-D, land. All right. Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 through 21 says, on that day, the Lord made a covenant, an agreement with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give this land. And then he marks out the boundaries of the land in the chapter. From the Wadi, or from the river of Egypt, to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. That's Genesis 15, 18 to 21. And if you look at the map that I have at the bottom of page 1, you can see the boundaries of this land. Now, in biblical times, there was no such terminology as the Middle East. No such terminology. All right. This kind of northeastern quadrant, this kind of northeastern horn was known as Northeast Africa, because you see the connection between where Jordan is, that tip of Egypt, and then down to the Sudan. All of that is the continent of Africa. And this all used to be a part of the continent of Africa. Remember, we said in a couple of lessons ago, the Suez Canal, the building of the Suez Canal is what messed all of this up. All right. What messed all of it up, in addition to the politics. All right. So if you don't remember anything else I say tonight, the first thing I need you to remember is that the major point and reason for this conflict has to do with land. All right. It has to do with land. And we're not talking about, listen, we're not talking about, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we're not talking about a large piece of land. All right. So not to mess us up, just know, number one, we're talking about land. Okay. And if you look at that map at the bottom of page 1, those of you who are blessed and able to travel internationally, you see where the UAE is, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, those who have been or want to go to Dubai, Bahrain, all right, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Afghanistan to the right, Iran, Pakistan. All of these are the areas where we have major military conflicts going on right now. All right. But look at that black boundary. That's the land that is referenced in Genesis 15, 18 through 21. All right. Go to page 2. The other thing that fuels this notion is not just the land, but the fact that, if I can use the terminology, the nation of Israel, or those who are regarded as Jews, take very seriously this thing about being the chosen people of God. So if we are, the thinking goes, the chosen people of God, and God has designated us to be the owners and controllers of this land and nobody else, you can see how conflict can come into play. All right. So page 2, Deuteronomy chapter 7 kind of lays out this whole notion about the chosen people. I've only cited the first 9 verses, but when you get a chance, you really should read all of Deuteronomy chapter 7. All right. Let me just read the first 9 verses. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations, larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, small g. And the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Listen to God talking to Israel about what they are supposed to do to any surrounding nations and peoples, right? Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. An Asherah pole is like a totem pole that has different images and faces on it, because a lot of these nations were worshiping other types of gods, right? So God says, cut down those poles and burn their idols in the fire. That's verse 5. Now, verse 6 is where this whole thing comes about being chosen. For you, Israel, you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors, that would be Abraham and them, that he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, that would be Moses and them, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now, therefore, know therefore rather that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. All right. So we've got, listen, follow me. So we've got a people being given control of land. 1. Then we got these same people being told, you are the chosen people of God. Y'all need to let that process a minute. All right. Let that process a minute. All right. God says, isn't it interesting how people all of a sudden want to be connected and follow God when they're going to benefit from it. All right. All right. So God says, I'm giving you this land. If we're following the biblical story, I'm giving you this land, and I am choosing you to be the chosen people. I don't have time to go into it tonight, what that really means. But the short sentence answer, because people always ask, well, why did God choose the Israelites as his chosen people? Right? Answer number one, I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. And I don't even think the Jews know. Because God says in the chapter, if we believe the chapter, he says, I didn't choose you because you were the largest group of people. In fact, you were the fewest of all people. But then the text says, but it was because the Lord loves you. And I think the way we should interpret that is, one way to interpret it, to consider interpreting it, is that for whatever God's reason was, God wanted to reveal God's self to humanity through this particular group of people. Hence, nobody knows the mind of God. And if there's anybody, including Jews, who can tell you why they were chosen to be the people of God, I would raise an antenna on that. I don't know that anybody knows. But see, this is why if we're going to be people of the Bible, and we're going to be people who understand scripture and the story, you can't pick and choose what parts you like. Okay? You can't pick and choose what part goes with you. The best we can try to do is get understanding of it as best we can. All right? So, land, number one, being designated as chosen people, number two. Now, here's the thing. Go down to the bottom of page 2, number 3. The people we are designating as Israeli and the Palestinians have a common ancestry. They have common genetics. They have common DNA. And there's just so much of it to read right now. But when you get a chance, I need you to read, as I have listed, Deuteronomy chapters 29, 30, and 31. 3 chapters, long chapters. But these 3 chapters are known as the Palestinian covenant. There are several covenants or agreements, particularly in the Old Testament, that God made. There's the Mosaic covenant. There's the Davidic covenant. There's the Abrahamic covenant. There's the Palestinian covenant. And then when we get to the New Testament, there's the New Covenant, where Jesus establishes a new agreement. Matthew 5:17. I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. All right. But the nation of Israel and the Palestinians, I think somebody put in the chat earlier, are brothers. They related. We talk about all the same people, really, if we're looking at it from a genetic standpoint, because we've already established, if we go with the biblical story from Genesis 1, that all humanity is related. Everybody evolved out of the first humans, post-flood. All right? So we've got this common ancestry, right? We're related. Okay? Now, fast forward over hundreds of years, fast forward, conflicts, wars, all of that stuff that happened in that part of the world that we probably know very little about. Very little about it was taught to us when we were in school and social studies and civics. Most of the time, many of us were not fortunate to focus on learning this information because it wasn't taught. Not our fault, not your fault. It wasn't taught. And the people who were teaching it, people who were talking about the Black presence in the Bible and talking about the African impact on world history, were branded as crazy. That there's something wrong with them, right? That they are odd, that they are countercultural people, all right? So let's just fast forward. God, there's so much here. Now, in 1948, Israel was officially established as what's called a nation state, as a sovereign entity of its own, right? But prior to 1948, under what's called the British Mandate, the whole region was known as Palestine. The whole region was known as Palestine until 1948. Letter B, read what it says, letter B. Israel's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, proclaimed the modern state of Israel on May the 14th, 1948, establishing, watch this, a safe haven for Jews fleeing persecution and seeking a national home on land to which they cite deep ties over generations. Land, 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 land. Okay? The British Mandate expired on May the 14th, 1948. So they organized Israel as its own sovereign nation, and this was recognized by President Harry Truman. All right? Now, why was the United States so interested in Israel and remains interested in Israel today? Whatever your politics are, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about your politics. Whatever your politics are, you can have whatever politics you want to have. But from a macro 70,000 foot level, in my opinion, from 1948 forward, there are two reasons why the United States was and still is, as a government, interested in Israel and that whole region of the world, including Africa. But nobody's going to talk about that. All right? Reason number one is oil. Hear me, y'all. Hear me. Listen, this ain't the Jesus gonna shout you down the street Bible study. All right. I'm trying to get you an awareness of how this thing works. All right. Number one is oil. Some of the largest deposits of oil are in that region, known as the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, other countries. They have oil, almost an unlimited supply of oil, right? It's the same way, I think I told you all about certain portions of South Africa and countries in Africa that mine diamonds, right? When I went to South Africa to preach several years ago, they took me to this town named Kimberley. And in Kimberley, they have what they call the Big Hole. The Big Hole is so named because they have mined so many diamonds that it left almost a moon-sized crater. And to this day, diamonds are mined in Africa. All right. There's been significant British government and corporate influence in Africa. And one of the latest influences in Africa now is China. All right. but I'm trying to help you at least understand some of it. The second reason the United States was involved in other people's business is because the Soviet Union at the time, as it was so named, was starting to exert its influence. And the United States did not want the Soviet Union to have the kind of influence that they forecast that they might have. So the United States has developed an alliance with Israel. I really wish I could say it the way I want to say it, but let me see how I can say this. I could make an argument that Israel can do no wrong in the eyes of the United States politically or economically. It doesn't matter who the president is, whether that person is Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. All right. And Israel is geographically, strategically located. We're not even going to deal with the part that they are part of. We could argue that they are part of Africa. Now, I don't deal with that. But they are geographically and strategically located. Soviet Union, Europe can be reached from there. Anywhere that has potential conflict in the world can be reached from Israel. But because we got to protect that oil, we have developed relationships with Israel that engenders our unequivocal support. All right. And let me see if y'all still here. All right. So the truth of the matter, is that there has been an ongoing conflict over the years between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews. So this conflict that we're seeing now is not new. All right. Go to the next page now. So this group, Hamas, has claimed responsibility for this attack. All right. What is Hamas? I'm at the top of page 3. All right. Hamas was founded in 1987 and led by Ismail Haniyeh. Hamas is an acronym for Harakat al-Mukawana al-Islamiyah, or the Islamic Resistance Movement. So Hamas, H-A-M-A-S, is an acronym. Number 2, Hamas is dedicated to the establishment of an independent Islamic state in historical Palestine and has controlled the Gaza Strip. All right. So out of this land, right, out of this land, the Palestinians have been given 2 areas. One of 2 Palestinian territories, along with the West Bank since 2007. So if you look down at the bottom of page 3, I give you this map, right? So this is the Gaza Strip, right? I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but this is the Gaza Strip, and Israel has cordoned off this area, which we now know as Palestine. A part of Israel, but it's now regarded as Palestine. The United Nations classifies Israel as an occupier state over the Palestinian territories, whose occupations and annexations following the 1967 Six-Day War remain in violation of international law. All right. Hamas is one of two major political forces in the Palestinian territories, the other being Fatah, a rival group previously known as the Palestinian National Liberation Movement. Fatah retains control of the Palestinian National Authority in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. So this is called the West Bank. The military wing, number 4, of Hamas is known as the Al-Qassam Brigades, the largest and best equipped military group operating within Gaza. And it is believed that they get the majority of their military and financial support from Iran. It is so believed. Since 2007, Israel has imposed an air, land, and sea blockade on the Gaza Strip, saying the move was necessary to prevent Hamas, which is regarded as a terrorist organization, to prevent Hamas attacks on the country. The United Nations and international human rights groups have condemned the blockade and have described Gaza, watch this, as the world's largest open-air prison. Residents of Gaza are surrounded by concrete walls and barbed wire fences, unable to leave the territory without Israeli-approved permits. So if you look at that map at the bottom of page 3, you see that fence? Let me give you the American equivalent. It's like the border wall. It's like the border wall, okay? You see that fence? That sections off Palestine. And the people live inside of that and can only come out with permission of the Israeli government. All right? Number 6, down at the bottom. Half of Gaza's population is under the age of 19, but faces dire economic prospects as 16 years of Israel's blockade and a ban on imports and exports have crippled the economy. The unemployment rate in Gaza is above 40%. More than 65% of the population is under the poverty line, and 63% of Gazans are deemed food insecure, according to the UN. So go to the next page, and here's just another image of what we're talking about, all right? You see Palestine, the Gaza Strip. You see the border between Palestine and what is now known as Israel. And you see the other countries that are adjacent, Jordan, Syria, all right? You see Egypt down to the left. So this is the region of the country. This is the region of the world, rather, that we are talking about. When you hear on the news them talking about what's happening in the West Bank, all right? This is the area. Jericho is in the West Bank. Bethlehem is in the West Bank. A lot of these places that you've read about in scripture, that's the area. This is the Holy Land. This is the Holy Land, all right? Now, number 7, Hamas has always espoused violence as a means to liberate occupied Palestinian territories and has called for the annihilation of Israel. Now, whether you believe the Israeli position or the Palestinian position, we should not support violence and destruction of lives, no matter who it is, okay? Hamas has carried out suicide bombings and over the years fired tens of thousands of increasingly powerful rockets from Gaza into Israel, similar to what they did the other day. Hamas has also established a network of tunnels running from Gaza to Egypt to smuggle in weapons, as well as attack tunnels burying into Israel, attack tunnels. In recent years, Hamas has appeared to be more focused on running Gaza than attacking Israel. And of course, that changed Saturday. And I put this last one in, number 8, just so you can get a sense of what we're talking about. The Gaza Strip is 25 miles long, 3.5 to 7.5 miles wide, and has a total area of 141 square miles. So we're not even talking about a large piece of land. All right. So what does all this mean to us, and why should we care? I am willing to hear some of your thoughts. Not so much questions at this point, but some of your thoughts. Why do we care? Number one, we should care because I think we cannot be spiritual people and support death and destruction and violence and killing, no matter who it is. But I really need you all to see that God is not making any more land. And what many of us have learned late to the party, that the greatest source of wealth creation is land. When you have land that cannot be recreated, the land, and many times in this region of the world, what's in the land can be the greatest source of wealth creation. Listen, it has been no accident that Black people from the get-go have been denied ownership of land. Redlining was no accident, because anybody who knows how wealth is created knows that it is created based on the ownership of land and property. And if you can cut off a group of people from having access and ownership of that which will create property, which will create wealth, you can keep them in a place of economic subjugation. I gave you these statistics in a sermon or in a Bible study several weeks ago. I talked about the wealth creation of or the net worth of Black people in New Jersey versus white people in New Jersey. And I'm assuming you know how to calculate net worth, right? Net worth is when you take the value of what you own and deduct everything you owe. All right. My undergraduate degree is in accounting. So the basic accounting equation is assets equal liabilities plus capital. All right. An asset is what you own. A liability is what you owe. And capital is what you're worth. Okay. So we say we own the homes we live in, but we don't own them. Many of us, we own a percentage of them. We won't own them until we've paid off the 30-year mortgage. That's when we own it, when there is no encumbrance to what we own. So anything you own, listen, you don't owe nobody for it. So you can own a car, but as long as you got a note on the car, you don't really own the car. All right. So anytime we owe somebody something, credit card debt, student loan, personal loan, anything, right? We don't own it. And then depending on what you own will depend on how it gets valued, right? So land tends to keep its value. Cars do not keep value. So when you drive a car off a lot, it already begins to depreciate. All right. So land, depending on some other factors, tends to hold value or appreciate. And there have been government-sponsored attempts. God, I shouldn't even say this. There have been government-sponsored attempts to devalue land in neighborhoods and sections and cities for a time until you press the value of it down so that people who have money can come and buy it and then redevelop it so that the value goes up. God, I know I'm right. I know I'm right. And because we don't have, as a people, access to capital, that's one of the reasons I'm trying all I can. God knows. I just don't want to sell this land on Hickory Street. I just don't want to do it. But there have been so many factors that have not gone the way we want them to go. When you have land, you have wealth. You have access to capital. Those of you who own your homes outright, you should never go to a bank for a loan again because you have equity. You have equity in what you own, so you can borrow against yourself. Why do we care about all this, right? Why do we care about all this? We care because we have a basic love for human life. We care because I'm always amazed at the news. Whenever there's a tragedy, they'll say, and 11 Americans were killed. Like everybody else that got killed was not important. I mean, it's just the hypocrisy of it is what drives me nuts. So let me stop. So I am hoping out of this Bible study, I don't know. I just thought it was important for us to at least get some of the basic data about what's the nature of this conflict, right? And we don't want to see anybody bomb. We don't want to be bombed. We don't know nothing about what it's like to live in a place where your property has been destroyed. Most of us don't know anything about that. You know, we don't know anything about what it's like sleeping under the stars. We don't know anything about not having access to a bathroom, clean water, food, right? Aside from the early years of the American experiment, there hasn't been a war on this land in many, many years. So the hypocrisy of it for me is, I don't have a problem with partnerships. I don't have a problem with alliances. I do think that the same level of support that we extend to other countries and other places need to be extended to people right here. And I feel that way about migrants. No issue helping migrants. However, there was a whole city full of homeless before the migrants came. And if all of a sudden we can find places for our migrants to live, why can't we find places for the homeless who are already here? Now, that's just my strange thinking. This is not an anti-migrant message. We have enough resources. We're the richest country in the world. We got enough resources to do whatever we want to do. But we've got to step away from the hypocrisy. All right, I'm done. Anybody got any questions? any comments or questions or anything? Sister Karen Cooper. Now, you know you can't do it like that, but go ahead, unmute yourself and unmute yourself.
Okay, there it is. I had a little issue unmuting myself because I have my chart up too. But I just want to thank you for this open and discussion because I know this is the main thing that I was hoping that you would be discussing this evening. I was in conversation with someone earlier, and the fact that you have brought it from the biblical times, from the beginning in Genesis up to the present, and keeping us knowledgeable. And in your words, it's just awareness. It's thank you. So all I can say is situation awareness, and I want to thank you so much for that.
Welcome. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Yes, Pastor. This is Mother Rose. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
You and I are of the same mind. I have always said all the homeless people here, they can't seem to help them. But soon as the immigrants come over here, they got some place to go. They giving them jobs. They're doing everything. I'm not against that, but take care of home first. That's what I say. And I appreciate this study tonight because I've learned a lot about what's going on over there. And I thank you so much for that. That's what I have to say.
You're welcome. Reverend MJ, I circled that area on the last page because that's the area we're talking about. And I just wanted to show the connection between Egypt and that whole red circled area is the area of Palestine and Israel that we're talking about. All right. So, I mean, this is a tough conversation to have. Cheryl?
No, I just, as soon as this happened, all the speculations came out, and I was just reading some information on the relationship of Iran. Everyone's denying, no, I didn't have anything to do with it. But do you think Russia is using this to kind of get more? Because if the U.S. is focusing and spending more money on Israel and less on Ukraine, do you think that's possibly a strategy?
Sure. It's but let me say this to you, and again, my comments and my perspective is certainly mine. You don't have to go along with it. You don't have to agree with it. But here's what I've learned. What's the name of that book? I can't find it right now. But there's a book I want you all to pick up. Can't find it right this minute. But it basically says this. I think the name of the book is the Deficit Myth. deficit myth. To your question, Sister Cheryl, there is no such thing as the United States not having money for what it wants to have. So when we talk about
Exactly.
deficits, there's no such thing as a
Yeah, or
deficit.
Washington shutting down last week.
No such thing, because we control the currency. We make the money, and we can make all the money we want to make at any time. So these billions of dollars that we send to other countries to help them. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. There was a recent calculation that said that if the government was going to pay reparations to Black people, it would cost $14 trillion. And that's one of the reasons why some folks say we can't pay reparations. Well, we control the money. We make the money. So there's no such thing as a deficit. Of course, politicians are not going to say that. I mean, you know, where is all this money coming from to send to all of these countries? Where's it coming from?
Us.
But to your Russian question, it could be right through here. I don't put nothing, never have put anything past Russia. They could be working behind the scenes and in the cut. And what we've got to somehow learn to do, and again, this is not popular. This is not necessarily church related, but we've got to learn to keep our eye on the ball and not the distraction.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
And unfortunately, many of us are not in positions to know when it's a distraction versus when it is the real thing, right? None of us are. So it could be with Russia. Right through here, he needs allies to support what he's doing in Ukraine. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, that we don't talk about it, we don't hear about it, but there are wars going on in 122 places in this world. Don't talk about it, don't hear nothing about it, right? The Sudan and those other countries in Africa where people have been annihilated and destroyed and hostages taken and executed. Our country didn't seem to have the same motivation to run to those countries. Listen, can I say this? Y'all are taping this, right? If I go missing in the next couple of days, if I go missing in the next couple of days, y'all just make sure y'all send somebody to find me.
We gonna say, where you at? We come look for you.
That is not even funny.
For real
We'll
though.
come look for you.
For real though. Brother Brown?
Yes, as our friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Dees would say, it's complicated. It's important that we maintain alliances for strategic purposes, but it's also important that we recognize the human rights of the Palestinians who are not free people. So we can really understand, Malcolm X by any means necessary, that's what they're doing. But see, Israel has committed a lot of atrocities too. So, so it really goes both ways. But our media only gives us a one-sided view. And I'm not anti-Semitic, but who controls the media? Think about it. Think about it.
And let me conclude by saying that I have given tonight a very cursory rudimentary, very cursory, very limited scope of what this whole thing is all about. Again, I am no expert on it, but I do know what I know and I see what I see. And ladies and gentlemen, this stuff doesn't come to us by osmosis, right? We've got to take the time to do some reading, some studying, and listening to various perspectives and viewpoints from people who are reputable and who kind of know how these cultures and countries and governments operate, right? So I am not in any way the Middle Eastern expert, right? In any way. I'm not the African expert. But because we are trying to be better spiritually, I just thought it was important for us to track it a little bit from the biblical foundation, to know that what we're dealing with here has some biblical relevance. It's all about land and who gonna control the land, right? Y'all remember a few years ago when we heard stories about how Israel went into Palestine and bulldozed the people's homes?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, forced eviction. Who was it? It was Begin, Menachem Begin, and Sadat, who struck an agreement about the land sharing. And shortly after that, they both was gone. So we joking, right, tonight, right? But if y'all don't hear from me or see me in the next 2-3 days, y'all better come looking for me. I mean that thing. Shoot. because again, somebody can hear this on the airwaves and really take it the wrong way, and people are mean, and they'll retaliate just on the principle of silencing another voice. To end by answering your question, Sister Paulette, prophecies do not have a time limit, right? Prophecies will be fulfilled. We just don't know when they will be fulfilled, right? But prophecies do not have an expiration date. All right? All right. I thank y'all for hanging in here with me tonight. We'll try next week to roll back into the subject matter from the book. So these couple of weeks should have given you time to catch up on your reading, catch up on answering your questions, and we will go into, I think it is chapter 4 next week. He introduces Jesus early in the book in terms of his Blackness. So we'll probably use that and do some other extended conversation as well. All right. Please hear my heart and receive the information I've tried to provide as best I could. All right. Father, thank you for this Bible study, this gathering. Thank you for these, your people. Bless us now as we go from this place. Open up our hearts and